The dog wasn't digging randomly. That was the first thing Daniel Hale noticed. Not the mud, not the storm-soaked ground, not even the fact that a German Shepherd was out here alone in the middle of nowhere. What struck him first was the pattern. It was too focused. Too precise. Too desperate to be meaningless. Rain had been falling for hours, turning the mountain trail into a thick, unstable mess of wet earth and shifting ground, the kind of terrain that swallowed footprints and erased evidence within minutes, but somehow, this one spot was different. The mud here wasn't just disturbed. It was torn apart. Clawed open. Like something underneath it mattered. Daniel stood still for a moment, just watching. The German Shepherd didn't notice him at first. Or maybe she did, and chose not to react. Her entire body was locked into the task, paws moving rapidly, digging deeper, faster, ignoring the mud coating her legs, her chest, her face, her breathing heavy but controlled, driven by something stronger than instinct. Not hunting. Not playing. Searching. Daniel stepped forward slowly, his boots sinking slightly into the wet ground, his movements quiet out of habit rather than necessity. Old habits never really left. Even years after the uniform was gone. Even after the mission stopped. Even after he told himself he was done. The wind moved through the trees above him, low and steady, carrying the scent of rain and something else, something faint, buried under the surface. Metal. Earth. And something he couldn't quite place yet. The dog suddenly stopped. Just for a second. Her head lifted slightly, ears twitching, her body freezing in place. Then she turned. Not startled. Not aggressive. Just aware. Her eyes met his. And in that moment, everything shifted. Because those weren't the eyes of a stray. They weren't wild. They weren't confused. They were focused. Intentional. And filled with something Daniel hadn't seen in a long time. Urgency. Not fear. Not panic. Urgency. The kind that didn't ask for help. The kind that expected it. Daniel didn't speak. Didn't move too quickly. He just stood there, letting the moment settle, letting her decide what came next. The dog looked at him for a second longer. Then, she turned back. And started digging again. Faster this time. More aggressive. Like his presence had confirmed something. Like she had been waiting for him. Daniel's jaw tightened slightly. That feeling again. The one he didn't trust. The one that had followed him out of places he didn't talk about anymore. Instinct. The kind that didn't explain itself. The kind that didn't need to. He stepped closer. Carefully. The ground shifted under his weight, mud pulling at his boots, but he adjusted automatically, finding balance, moving with control. When he reached her, he crouched slightly, his eyes scanning the hole she had been digging. At first, it looked like nothing. Just mud. Wet. Dark. Uneven. But then, he saw it. Something beneath the surface. Not natural. Not part of the earth. A shape. Hard edges. Buried. Daniel reached down slowly, his fingers pushing into the mud, clearing it away carefully, methodically, revealing more of whatever was hidden beneath. The dog stopped digging. But she didn't move away. She stayed right there. Watching. Waiting. Daniel cleared more of the surface. And then it became clear. Metal. Flat. Cold. Not random debris. Not something washed down by the storm. This had been placed here. Deliberately. Buried. Hidden. Daniel's expression shifted slightly, his mind already moving ahead, connecting pieces before they were fully visible. Because things like this didn't just end here. They led somewhere. Always. The dog let out a low sound. Not a bark. Not a growl. Something quieter. Something deeper. Daniel glanced at her briefly. She wasn't looking at him anymore. She was looking at the ground. At the metal. At what was still buried. Like she knew exactly what it was. Daniel pushed more mud away. The surface expanded. Rectangular. Smooth. Too clean. Too intentional. His fingers found an edge. He pulled. It didn't move. Heavy. Secured. Not meant to be found easily. Rain intensified slightly, water running into the hole, threatening to fill it again, to erase the progress, but Daniel didn't stop. He dug faster now. Using both hands. Clearing more space. More edges. More structure. Until finally. He saw enough to understand. A hatch. Buried beneath the mud. Hidden in the middle of nowhere. The dog stepped closer. Her body tense. Her breathing faster now. Daniel sat back slightly, his hands covered in mud, his eyes locked on the metal surface as the weight of what he was looking at settled into something real. Something dangerous. Because this wasn't an accident. This wasn't natural. This was built. Concealed. And whatever was underneath it was meant to stay hidden. The wind shifted again. And this time, Daniel smelled it clearly. Faint. But unmistakable. Rot. And something worse. He looked at the dog. She looked back at him. And for the first time, there was no question in her eyes. Only one thing. You're too late. Daniel's grip tightened slightly against the edge of the hatch. Because suddenly, this wasn't just a mystery. This was something else. Something darker. And whatever was buried beneath that metal was not supposed to be found. The rain didn't stop. It never really had. But now it felt louder. Heavier. Like the world itself was pressing down on that single point in the mud where the dog had been digging, where something buried was starting to come back to the surface. Daniel Hale didn't rush. He never rushed. Even now, even with that smell rising stronger from beneath the loosened soil, even with the dog standing inches away from him, her body tight with tension, her breathing uneven but controlled, he forced himself to slow down. Because rushing meant mistakes. And mistakes were what got people killed. He wiped one hand against his jacket, clearing enough mud to get a better grip, then leaned forward again, his fingers tracing along the edge of the metal hatch, searching for anything that might give. There was no handle. No obvious latch. Just smooth, cold metal, partially sealed into the earth like it had been meant to disappear. Daniel leaned closer. His eyes narrowed. The edges weren't just buried. They were packed. Deliberately reinforced with compacted soil and stone. Whoever put this here didn't just want it hidden. They wanted it sealed. The dog let out another low sound. This time sharper. More urgent. Daniel glanced at her again. Her eyes weren't on him. They were locked onto the hatch. Her ears tilted forward, her entire body leaning slightly toward it, like something beneath the metal was still present. That thought hit harder than he expected. He pushed it down immediately. Focus. Facts. Evidence. Not imagination. He shifted his weight and began digging again, faster now, clearing the edges more aggressively, using both hands, ignoring the cold mud soaking into his sleeves, into his skin. The rain filled the hole as quickly as he opened it, turning it into a thick slurry, but he kept going, pushing deeper, widening the space around the hatch until he could finally get his fingers fully under one side. He pulled. Nothing. He adjusted his grip. Pulled again. Still nothing. The hatch didn't move. Not even slightly. Daniel exhaled slowly. Then he changed approach. He stood up. Looked around. The forest was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that didn't belong to nature. No birds. No movement. Just rain. And that smell. Stronger now. Daniel scanned the ground nearby and spotted a thick fallen branch, partially stripped of bark, heavy enough to use as leverage. He grabbed it, dragged it closer, positioned one end under the edge of the hatch, then pressed down. Hard. The wood creaked. The mud shifted. The hatch moved. Just slightly. But enough. Enough to break whatever seal had been holding it down. The dog stepped back instinctively. Not in fear. In anticipation. Daniel pressed harder. The branch dug into the ground, bending under the pressure, but it held. And then, a dull metallic sound. A shift. The hatch lifted just enough to let air escape. And what came out of that narrow opening wasn't just a smell. It was a presence. Rot. Decay. And something deeper. Something that didn't belong above ground. Daniel froze. Just for a second. Because he knew that smell. He had known it before. In places far away from here. In places he had spent years trying to forget. He let the branch drop. Stepped back slightly. His breathing slowed. Controlled. Measured. But inside, something had already shifted. The dog didn't move. Didn't look away. She stood there, staring at the opening like she had been waiting for this moment. Like she needed him to see it. Daniel stepped forward again. Slowly. Carefully. He reached down. Grabbed the edge of the hatch. And pulled. This time. It opened. Not fully. Not easily. But enough. Enough for the darkness beneath it to become visible. A narrow space. Vertical. Like a shaft. The inside lined with concrete. Old. Damp. Water dripping down the walls. And at the bottom. Something. Daniel leaned closer. Squinting through the dim light filtering down from above. Trying to make sense of what he was seeing. Shapes. Not clear. Not defined. But there. The dog let out a sharp bark. Loud. Sudden. It broke the silence like a crack of thunder. Daniel flinched slightly, his instincts reacting before his mind caught up. Easy, he muttered, more to himself than to her. But she didn't stop. She barked again. Then moved closer. Closer to the edge of the open hatch. Looking down. Then back at him. Then down again. Faster now. More urgent. Daniel followed her gaze. And this time, he saw it clearly. A hand. Pale. Still. Half buried beneath something else. Something larger. Something human. His stomach tightened. His grip on the edge of the hatch hardened. Because now, there was no doubt. This wasn't just something buried. This was someone. And not just one. Multiple. Stacked. Hidden. Forgotten. Or meant to be. Daniel leaned back slowly, his eyes still locked on the darkness below. His mind already moving ahead. Too fast. Too sharp. Because this wasn't an accident. This wasn't random. This was deliberate. Organized. And that meant someone else knew this was here. The dog stopped barking. Suddenly. Completely. Her body stiffened. Her head tilted slightly. Listening. Daniel felt it too. That shift. That subtle change in the air. The kind that came before something happened. Before something moved. He turned his head slowly. Scanning the trees. The path behind him. The slope leading down toward the valley. And then, a sound. Faint. But clear. Footsteps. Not close. But not far. Daniel's expression changed instantly. The calm disappeared. Replaced by something sharper. Something colder. Because now, this wasn't just about what was in the ground. This was about who put it there. And who might still be watching. The dog moved closer to him. Not scared. Not retreating. Positioning. Daniel stood fully now. His body shifting into something he hadn't used in years. Not the man who had walked away. The one before that. The one who knew what came next. The footsteps grew louder. More than one. Daniel glanced down at the open hatch one last time. Then back toward the trees. His jaw tightened slightly. Because now, he wasn't alone. And whatever this place was, he had just found something he wasn't supposed to see. The footsteps didn't rush, and that was the first thing that made Daniel Hale's chest tighten in a way the cold rain couldn't explain, because men who rushed made noise, and noise meant mistakes, but these footsteps, they were controlled, measured, spaced just far enough apart to suggest discipline instead of panic, and that told him more than anything else could have. Whoever was coming through those trees already knew where they were going. Daniel didn't move immediately, didn't reach for anything, didn't react in a way that would betray urgency, because urgency without control got people killed, and the moment he heard that sound, the forest stopped being quiet, it became active, alive with threat, alive with intention, and everything he had tried to bury inside himself began rising again whether he wanted it to or not. The dog felt it too. She didn't bark this time. She didn't dig. She shifted. Slowly, deliberately, stepping closer to his side, her body lowering just slightly, not out of fear, but readiness, her eyes no longer on the open hatch but fixed toward the trees where the sound was coming from. Daniel's breathing slowed, deepened, his mind recalibrating faster than he could stop it, pulling old instincts out of places he hadn't allowed himself to visit in years, analyzing distance, terrain, visibility, sound reflection, wind direction, all of it happening automatically, without permission. The rain softened briefly, like the forest itself was leaning in to listen. Then he saw movement. Just a flicker at first, a shadow breaking the pattern of the trees, then another, and another, spaced out, moving carefully, deliberately, using the terrain instead of fighting it. Daniel didn't step back from the hatch. He didn't close it. He didn't hide it. Because it was too late for that. The moment he opened it, whatever this was, it had already changed. The first man stepped into partial view, just enough for Daniel to see shape without detail, dark clothing, posture forward, not cautious but not careless either, weapon low but ready, the kind of stance that didn't come from guesswork. Behind him, another figure moved slightly to the left, then another further back, spacing out, controlling angles. 3 at least. Maybe more. Daniel's jaw tightened, but his face didn't change. He stayed where he was, one hand resting loosely near his side, the other still stained with mud, his posture relaxed enough to look unthreatening, but not weak. The dog let out a low, quiet growl, the kind that barely broke the air but carried enough weight to say everything it needed to. Easy, Daniel murmured under his breath, not looking at her, because right now, every movement mattered. The man in front stepped closer, just enough for his face to catch what little light filtered through the storm. Mid-30s. Clean. Focused. Eyes sharp but calm, like this wasn't unexpected. Like Daniel wasn't unexpected. You shouldn't be here, the man said, his voice even, almost conversational, but there was something beneath it, something controlled. Daniel didn't answer immediately. He let the silence sit for a second, then another, letting the man feel it, letting him adjust, because silence was a tool too. Neither should they, Daniel replied finally, his voice low, steady, with just enough weight to shift the balance of the conversation without escalating it. The man's eyes flicked briefly toward the open hatch. Just for a second. But it was enough. Confirmation. He already knew. Or at least suspected. The man's expression didn't change much, but something tightened behind his eyes. You opened it, he said. Not a question. Daniel didn't respond. Didn't need to. The answer was already there. The man exhaled slowly, almost like disappointment. That complicates things, he added. Behind him, one of the other figures shifted slightly, adjusting position, closing distance, tightening the space without making it obvious. Daniel saw it. Tracked it. Logged it. Yeah, Daniel said quietly. It usually does. The rain picked up again, heavier drops hitting leaves, ground, metal, filling the space with noise that made everything feel closer than it was. The man took another step forward. You're not from around here, he said, studying Daniel more closely now. No, Daniel replied. Didn't think so. A pause. Then the man's gaze dropped again, briefly, toward the hatch. You see anything? He asked. Daniel held his eyes. Didn't blink. Didn't shift. Enough. That was the moment the air changed. Subtle. But real. The man's posture didn't tighten. Didn't escalate. But the space between them narrowed. That's a problem, the man said. Daniel almost smiled. Not because it was funny. But because it was simple. Clean. Honest. Yeah, he said again. It is. The dog stepped slightly forward, her growl deepening just a fraction, her body aligning with Daniel's stance without being told. The man noticed that too. His eyes flicked to her, then back to Daniel. Call her off, he said calmly. Daniel didn't move. She's not the problem. Another pause. Longer this time. Then the man nodded slightly, like he had just confirmed something important. You military? He asked. Daniel didn't answer. But he didn't need to. The man saw it anyway. In the posture. In the stillness. In the way he didn't react to pressure. Thought so, the man said quietly. That means you understand how this ends. Daniel's eyes didn't leave his. No, he replied. It means I understand how this starts. And that was it. The line. The shift. The moment where conversation stopped being useful. The man's hand moved. Fast. Controlled. Not reckless. Daniel moved faster. The world snapped into motion, the calm breaking into something violent and immediate, the first shot cracking through the rain, echoing through the trees, and suddenly the forest wasn't quiet anymore, it was alive with chaos, with sound, with movement, with everything Daniel had tried to leave behind. He dropped low instantly, shifting off the line, the dog moving with him, not away, not retreating, but adapting, her body reacting to his movement like it was instinct, like it was connection, like it was something deeper than training. Another shot tore through the space where he had been standing a second before, splintering bark, kicking up mud, and Daniel moved again, using the terrain, using the trees, using everything around him, not to fight yet, but to survive the first second. Because the first second was everything. And somewhere behind him, just a few feet away, that open hatch still waited. And whatever was buried inside it, was the reason all of this had just begun. The first second passed, but it didn't slow anything down, it only sharpened it, stretched it into something tighter, more precise, more dangerous, and Daniel Hale moved through it like he had never left it, like every year he had spent trying to forget had been nothing more than distance, not absence. The rain became background noise, the forest became structure, every tree a shield, every shadow a potential threat, every movement calculated before it fully happened, and the moment the first shot cracked through the air, everything inside him aligned without hesitation. He shifted low behind a thick trunk, boots digging into wet soil, body angled just enough to minimize exposure while still keeping sight lines open, his breathing steady, controlled, his mind mapping positions faster than his eyes could track them. 3 confirmed. 1 left flank. 1 center. 1 holding back, covering. Maybe more beyond that. The dog stayed close, not panicking, not bolting, her body pressed low to the ground, her eyes locked in the same direction as his, reading movement, reacting without confusion, without fear, as if she understood this space as clearly as he did. Another shot cracked, closer this time, hitting the tree just inches from his shoulder, sending splinters into the air, and Daniel shifted instantly, not waiting, not hesitating, breaking position before they could adjust, moving to the next point of cover in a smooth, controlled motion. The ground was unstable, mud pulling at his boots, but he compensated automatically, weight distribution, balance, momentum, everything precise, everything intentional. The man from before moved again, stepping out just enough to fire, not exposing fully, just testing angles, probing for weakness, and Daniel saw it, read it, responded without thinking, leaning out just long enough to fire back, forcing him to retreat, not to hit, not yet, but to disrupt, to break rhythm, to take control of the pace. That was the key. Always the pace. The dog barked once, sharp, directional, and Daniel followed it instinctively, turning slightly, catching movement on his right just before another man tried to push forward through the trees, and Daniel fired again, controlled, one shot, forcing him back, cutting off that angle before it could fully develop. They weren't rushing. That was the problem. They were adapting. Adjusting. Learning his movement. Spreading wider now, trying to flank, trying to box him in without overcommitting. This wasn't intimidation anymore. This was containment. Daniel's mind shifted again, recalculating, adjusting strategy in real time, because holding position wasn't an option, not with numbers, not with terrain, not with what was behind him. The hatch. The bodies. The truth. He glanced back for half a second, just enough to confirm its position, still open, still exposed, rain beginning to fill the hole again, but not enough to hide it, not enough to undo what had been done. Too late for that. The dog moved slightly ahead, then stopped, looking back at him, her body tense, not confused, not afraid, but waiting, like she was asking something without words. Move. Daniel understood. Staying here meant getting surrounded. Moving meant risk. But movement also meant control. He shifted again, this time not just for cover, but for direction, angling away from the hatch, drawing attention, pulling the threat with him, creating space, creating distance from what mattered. Another shot came, closer, faster, but he was already moving, already gone from that position, already transitioning to the next, using the terrain not just to hide, but to guide the fight. The dog followed instantly, staying just ahead, not leading blindly, but matching his movement, her awareness syncing with his in a way that didn't feel random anymore. It felt connected. They moved through the trees, not running, not sprinting, but flowing, controlled speed, controlled direction, never in a straight line, always shifting, always adjusting, forcing the men behind them to chase instead of corner. The gunfire followed, not constant, but deliberate, spaced, measured, each shot an attempt to pin, to slow, to force a mistake. Daniel didn't give them one. Not yet. His mind kept building the picture, the patterns, the weaknesses. They were trained enough to spread, to coordinate, but not enough to close fast under pressure. That was something. That was something he could use. The ground sloped slightly downward, leading into denser forest where visibility dropped and movement became more difficult, but also more controlled, and Daniel angled toward it without hesitation. The dog moved ahead again, faster now, her pace increasing slightly, her body more urgent, like she knew where they needed to go, like this wasn't random anymore. Behind them, voices now. Faint. Short commands. They were communicating. Adjusting again. Daniel pushed forward, deeper into the trees, branches scraping against his jacket, mud splashing with each step, the rain mixing with sweat, with tension, with everything building toward something that hadn't fully revealed itself yet. And then, the dog stopped. Suddenly. Completely. Her body stiff, ears forward, eyes locked on something ahead. Daniel slowed instantly, dropping his center of gravity, his eyes scanning forward, through the trees, through the shadows, through the layers of movement and stillness that made up the forest. At first, nothing. Just trees. Rain. Darkness. Then he saw it. A shape. Low. Partially hidden. Not natural. Not part of the forest. Another structure. Smaller than the hatch. But connected. He felt it immediately. This wasn't just one place. This was part of something bigger. And whatever he had uncovered wasn't isolated. Behind him, the sound of movement grew closer again. The men were gaining ground. The window was closing. Daniel looked at the dog. She looked back at him. No hesitation. No doubt. Just direction. He exhaled once. Then moved forward. Because now, this wasn't just about surviving the moment. This was about understanding what he had stepped into. And whatever was ahead, was the next piece. The structure wasn't visible all at once. It revealed itself slowly. Piece by piece. Like it had been designed to stay hidden unless you were already too close to walk away. Daniel Hale moved forward carefully, his pace slowing despite the pressure building behind him, because rushing into something unknown was just another way of dying faster, and whatever this was, it didn't feel abandoned. It felt waiting. The dog reached it first. She didn't circle it. Didn't hesitate. She moved straight toward it, then stopped just a few feet away, her body lowering slightly, her head angled forward, her eyes locked on a single point along its side. Daniel followed her line of sight. At first glance, it looked like nothing more than a collapsed utility shed, the kind you might find scattered across older logging areas, half buried in mud and overgrowth, forgotten by time and weather. But that wasn't what it was. The angles were wrong. Too clean. Too intact beneath the damage. The roof sagged just enough to look unstable, but the frame beneath it held strong, reinforced. Deliberately. And along one side, partially covered by mud and fallen branches. A second hatch. Smaller than the first. But newer. Cleaner. Used. Daniel's eyes narrowed slightly as he approached, his body shifting automatically, positioning himself just off-center, minimizing exposure to both the structure and the direction the men were coming from. The dog stepped closer. Then looked back at him. Not waiting this time. Expecting. Daniel crouched beside the hatch, his hand hovering just above it for a second before making contact. Cold. Solid. Recently handled. The mud around the edges wasn't fully settled. There were marks. Fresh. Not washed away by the rain yet. Someone had been here. Recently. Very recently. Behind him, a branch snapped. Closer now. Too close. Daniel didn't turn. Didn't react visibly. But inside, everything tightened. He didn't have time. Not for caution. Not for full assessment. Not anymore. He grabbed the edge of the smaller hatch and pulled. It opened easier than the first. Too easy. And that was worse. Because it meant it was meant to be opened. The darkness inside wasn't as deep this time. There was light. Faint. Artificial. And a sound. Low. Mechanical. Steady. Daniel leaned slightly, just enough to see inside. A narrow stairway. Metal. Descending. Not old. Not abandoned. Active. The dog stepped forward immediately, placing one paw on the first step, then looking back at him again. Faster this time. More urgent. Daniel's jaw tightened. Not yet, he muttered quietly. But she didn't move back. She stayed there. Waiting. Because whatever was down there was connected to what she had been digging for. Connected to the bodies. Connected to everything. Another voice echoed faintly through the trees behind them. Closer now. Clearer. They are here. Daniel exhaled slowly. Time was gone. The decision wasn't optional anymore. He looked down into the stairwell. Then back at the forest. Then at the dog. And in that moment, he understood something that shifted everything again. She hadn't just been digging to show him what was buried. She had been leading him here. To this. To whatever was below. Daniel moved. Fast now. Controlled. He stepped down into the stairwell, his body turning slightly to cover the entrance for a second longer, scanning the trees one last time. Movement. Shadows closing in. No time. He dropped lower. Descending. The dog followed instantly. Behind them, the sound of footsteps broke into a run. And then, gunfire. A shot cracked through the rain, striking the edge of the structure above, sending fragments of wood and metal scattering down into the stairwell. Daniel didn't look back. He moved faster now, boots hitting metal steps, echoing in the narrow space, the light growing slightly stronger as they descended deeper. The air changed. Cooler. Still. Controlled. The storm disappeared above them. Replaced by something else. Something enclosed. Something hidden. At the bottom of the stairs, Daniel stopped. Just for a second. Because what opened in front of him was not what he expected. A corridor. Wide enough for two people. Walls reinforced with concrete and steel. Lights running along the ceiling. Flickering slightly. And along the floor. Tracks fresh. Wet. Leading deeper inside. The dog moved forward immediately. No hesitation. No fear. Daniel followed. Because now, there was no turning back. Behind them, the sound of movement echoed down the stairwell. Closer. Faster. They were coming. And whatever was hidden down here was about to become something much worse. The sound changed the deeper they went. It always did in places like this. Above ground, everything had layers, wind through trees, rain hitting leaves, distant movement blending into natural noise, but down here, sound became sharper, tighter, more deliberate, and every step Daniel Hale took echoed just enough to remind him how exposed they really were. The corridor stretched ahead in a straight line before curving slightly to the left, disappearing into dim artificial light that flickered inconsistently, like the system feeding it wasn't stable, like whatever powered this place wasn't meant to last forever, just long enough. Daniel moved carefully, his pace controlled but urgent, his eyes scanning every detail, every corner, every shift in shadow, because this wasn't just hidden, it was active. Used. Maintained. And that meant someone would be coming. The dog moved ahead of him, not too far, never too far, her body low but confident, her paws silent against the damp concrete floor, her focus locked forward like she already knew where this path led. Daniel noticed something else now. The air. It wasn't just cold. It was stale. Heavy. Like it hadn't been properly ventilated. And underneath that same smell. Stronger now. Rot. But mixed with something sharper. Chemical. Unnatural. His jaw tightened slightly. Because now the picture was starting to form. And it wasn't just about bodies. This was something bigger. Something organized. Something deliberate. The dog slowed suddenly. Then stopped. Her ears lifted. Her head angled slightly toward the left wall. Daniel stopped immediately behind her, his body lowering instinctively, his breathing slowing, his awareness sharpening. He followed her gaze. At first, nothing. Just concrete. Damp. Cracked in places. But then, he saw it. A door. Almost flush with the wall. Blended in. Painted the same color. Easy to miss unless you were looking for it. Or unless something told you it was there. The dog stepped closer to it. Then looked back at him. Not confused. Not questioning. Certain. Daniel moved forward slowly, his hand reaching out, pressing lightly against the surface. Solid. Reinforced. He felt along the edge. Found the seam. Then a handle. Cold. Metal. He paused. Just for a second. Because behind them, the echo of footsteps had reached the stairwell. They were inside now. No more distance. No more delay. He turned the handle. Slowly. Carefully. The door opened with a low, controlled creak. And what waited inside was worse than he expected. Much worse. The room was larger than the corridor. Wider. Deeper. Filled with rows of metal tables. Equipment. Containers. Lights hanging low from the ceiling. And along those tables, Bodies. Not buried. Not hidden. Displayed. Prepared. Some covered. Some not. All still. All silent. Daniel froze. Not because he hadn't seen death before. He had. More times than he could count. But this wasn't the result of chaos. This wasn't aftermath. This was system. Organization. Intent. The dog stepped into the room. Slowly. Her movement changed again. No longer urgent. No longer searching. But aware. Careful. Respectful. Daniel followed. His boots barely making a sound against the concrete as he moved deeper into the space, his eyes scanning everything, taking it in piece by piece. Tables arranged in order. Equipment clean. Tools placed with precision. This wasn't random. This wasn't panic. This was routine. His gaze shifted to one of the uncovered bodies. A man. Mid-30s. Clothes torn. Skin pale. Marks along his arms. Not just injury. Something else. Something deliberate. Daniel's chest tightened. Because now, this wasn't just disposal. This was process. Behind him, a sound. Closer now. Voices. Echoing through the corridor. They went down. Daniel turned instantly, his body shifting back into position, his mind snapping out of observation and into survival again. Too fast. Too much. Too exposed. He moved quickly now, scanning the room for exits, for cover, for anything that could give him an advantage. The dog moved again. Not toward the bodies. Not toward the center. Toward the far side of the room. Where the shadows were deeper. Where something else waited. Daniel followed her. Because at this point, she had been right every time. They reached the far wall. And that's when he saw it. Another door. Stronger. Heavier. Different from the rest. Secured. Locked. This one wasn't meant for access. It was meant for containment. The dog stopped in front of it. Her body tense. Her breathing faster. Her eyes locked on the door like she could see through it. Like she knew what was inside. Daniel stepped closer. His hand touching the surface. Cold. Thick. Reinforced steel. And from the other side. A sound. Faint. Weak. But real. A voice. Or something close to it. Daniel's eyes sharpened instantly. Because that meant one thing. Someone was still alive. Behind him, the footsteps reached the corridor. Closer now. Faster. No more time. Daniel looked at the dog. She looked back. No hesitation. No doubt. Only urgency. And in that moment, the mission changed. This wasn't about what had already happened. This was about what could still be saved. Daniel stepped forward. Placed both hands on the door. And prepared to break it open. Because whatever was behind it didn't have much time left. And neither did they. The door didn't open easily. It wasn't meant to. Daniel Hale felt it the moment he put his weight into it, the resistance immediate, solid, unyielding, like whatever was behind it had been locked away with intention, not convenience, and that only confirmed what his instincts were already screaming. This wasn't just a hidden room, this was a place designed to keep something in. Behind him, the voices were louder now. Closer. Boots striking concrete. Fast. Organized. Closing distance. Daniel didn't look back. He couldn't afford to. He adjusted his stance, feet planting firmly against the slick floor, hands gripping the edge of the door, shoulders tightening as he applied more force. The metal groaned slightly. But didn't give. The dog let out a sharp, urgent bark. Right at the door. Then again. Faster. More intense. Daniel's jaw clenched. Hold on, he muttered under his breath. Not to the dog. Not even to himself. To whoever was behind that door. He stepped back. Just one step. His eyes scanned the room quickly. Tools. Equipment. Metal rods. A broken support frame near the wall. He moved instantly, grabbing a heavy steel bar, dragging it back across the floor, positioning it against the door seam. Then he pressed. Hard. The bar bent slightly under the strain. The door shifted. Just enough. A small crack formed along the edge. Air escaped. And with it, a sound. Clearer now. A weak breath. A faint movement. Alive. Daniel's focus sharpened instantly. He pushed harder. The metal strained. Then, a sharp crack. The seal broke. The door shifted inward. Just enough. Daniel dropped the bar and grabbed the edge again, pulling with everything he had left. The door opened wider. And what he saw inside hit harder than anything before it. A small containment room. Cold. Bare. Dimly lit. And in the center, a man. Chained. Barely conscious. Head hanging low. Body weak. But breathing. Alive. Daniel moved immediately, stepping inside, crouching beside him, his hands working quickly to assess, to stabilize, to understand how much time they had. The man's eyes fluttered slightly. Unfocused. Then barely opened. His lips moved. No sound came out. Daniel leaned closer. It's all right, he said quietly. You're getting out. The man tried to speak again. This time a whisper. They won't let you. Daniel didn't respond. Because he already knew. Behind him, the door slammed open. Hard. Metal against concrete. Boots. Voices. Weapons. They were here. The dog reacted instantly, turning, positioning herself between the doorway and Daniel, her body low, her stance aggressive now, no hesitation left. Daniel stood. Slowly. His posture shifting again. Everything inside him locking into place. The part of him he had buried. The part that knew exactly what came next. 3 men entered first. Weapons raised. Spacing controlled. 1 covering the room. 1 moving left. 1 stepping forward. The same man from before stepped in behind them. Calm. Composed. Unshaken. His eyes moved across the room. Taking everything in. The open door. The broken seal. The man on the ground. Then finally, Daniel. A small shift in his expression. Not surprise. Not anger. Recognition. You just made this a lot worse, he said calmly. Daniel didn't move. Didn't flinch. Didn't step back. No, he replied quietly. I just stopped it from getting worse. The room went still. For half a second. Then, everything broke. Gunfire exploded through the confined space, the sound deafening, sharp, violent, tearing through air and metal and concrete, and Daniel moved instantly, dropping low, pulling the chained man behind cover, positioning himself between the threat and everything that mattered. The dog lunged forward, not blindly, not wildly, but with precision, intercepting movement, forcing hesitation, breaking rhythm. One of the men fired. Missed. Daniel returned fire. Controlled. Accurate. The first man dropped. The second shifted position. Daniel moved again. Faster. Cleaner. No wasted motion. No hesitation. This wasn't chaos. This was control. The confined space worked against them. Too many bodies. Too little room. Daniel used it. Every step calculated. Every angle controlled. The third man tried to push forward. Daniel cut him off. One shot. Down. The leader didn't rush. Didn't panic. He adjusted. Stepped back. Raised his weapon. Daniel saw it. And in that moment, everything narrowed. Just two men. One decision. One outcome. They fired at the same time. The sound echoed like thunder trapped inside steel. The leader staggered. Daniel didn't. He stepped forward. Closed the distance. Controlled. Final. The man dropped. The room fell silent. Not completely. Not peacefully. But final enough. Daniel stood still. Breathing steady. Eyes scanning. Confirming. Nothing moving. Nothing left. Behind him, the chained man breathed. Weak. But alive. The dog stood beside him. Still. Alert. But calm again. Daniel lowered his weapon slowly. Because now, this part was over. But what they had uncovered was only just beginning. And somewhere beyond these walls, there were still answers waiting. And consequences coming. The silence didn't feel peaceful. It felt earned. Heavy. Like the air itself had absorbed everything that had just happened and hadn't decided yet whether to let it go. Daniel Hale didn't lower his guard completely. Not yet. He stood still for a few seconds longer than necessary, his breathing controlled, his eyes moving across the room again, checking angles, checking bodies, checking for anything that didn't belong, because experience had taught him that the moment you thought it was over, was usually when it wasn't. Nothing moved. No hidden steps. No second wave. Just the low hum of failing lights and the distant echo of rain far above them. Slowly, carefully, Daniel lowered his weapon. Not out of comfort. Out of confirmation. The dog shifted slightly beside him, her posture relaxing just enough to show she felt it too. The immediate threat was gone. But something deeper remained. Something heavier. Daniel turned back toward the man on the floor. The one still breathing. Barely. He moved quickly now, dropping to one knee, his hands working fast, breaking the chains at the weakest points, using the same steel bar he had forced into the door, prying, twisting, leveraging until the metal gave way just enough to free him. The man didn't resist. Didn't react much at all. His body was too weak for that. But his eyes? They were open now. Focused. Locked onto Daniel. Trying to understand. Trying to hold on to something. "You're out," Daniel said quietly. The man's lips moved again. This time the sound came. Faint. Broken. "They took more," Daniel's expression tightened. "How many?" he asked. The man swallowed slowly, his throat dry, his voice barely holding together. "Don't know, they keep bringing them, different places, not just here." Daniel felt that settle. Deep. Because that meant this wasn't a single site. This wasn't isolated. This was a system. Bigger than this room. Bigger than this mountain. His mind started moving again. Fast. Connecting. Expanding. Because what they had just stopped wasn't the whole thing. It was just a piece. The dog moved closer again. Not to Daniel this time. To the man. She lowered her head slightly, sniffing gently, her presence calm, steady, grounding. The man's eyes shifted to her. And something changed. Not fear. Not confusion. Relief. A small breath escaped him. "She found you," he whispered. Daniel didn't answer. Because he already knew. The dog wasn't random. Nothing about this was random. She had led him here. Every step. Every turn. Every moment. For this. For him. For whatever still needed to be stopped. Daniel looked at her. Really looked. And for the first time, He didn't see just an animal. He saw purpose. Connection. Something deeper than instinct. Something that had chosen him. The man coughed slightly. Pain cutting through whatever strength he had left. "They are not done," he whispered. "They'll come back." Daniel nodded once. He didn't need convincing. "They won't find anything left," he said quietly. The dog lifted her head slightly. Her ears shifting. Listening. Daniel felt it too. Not footsteps this time. Not voices. Something else. Distant. Faint. But growing. Rotors. Helicopters. Rescue. Or response. Either way. Time was moving again. Daniel stood. His body heavier now. Not from exhaustion. From weight. From what this meant. From what came next. He moved through the room again, faster this time, collecting what he could, documents, drives, anything that looked like it mattered, anything that could connect this place to the rest of whatever this was. Because now, it wasn't enough to survive. It had to mean something. Behind him, the man leaned weakly against the wall, barely holding himself upright. The dog stayed close to him. Not leaving. Not moving away. Guarding. Daniel glanced back at them. Then toward the corridor. Then toward the stairwell. His path was clear. But not simple. Because going back up meant stepping back into the world. Into whatever waited above. Into consequences. Into truth. He moved toward the stairs. The dog followed. The man stayed behind for a moment. Then forced himself to stand. Because staying here wasn't an option anymore. As they reached the bottom of the stairs, the sound of helicopters grew louder, cutting through the storm above, breaking the silence of the forest, signaling that whatever had been hidden was about to be seen. Daniel paused. Just for a second. Looking up. Toward the exit. Toward the light. Then he took the first step upward. Because now, there was no going back. Only forward. And whatever waited above was about to change everything. The climb back up felt longer than the descent. Not because of the distance. But because of what Daniel Hale was carrying now. Not just the weight of the man behind him, barely able to keep his footing as he forced himself step by step up the narrow metal stairs, not just the files shoved inside Daniel's pack, damp but intact, holding answers that were going to unravel something far bigger than this place, but the weight of knowing. Knowing what had been hidden. Knowing how long it had probably been happening. Knowing that none of it had been an accident. The dog moved ahead again, climbing quickly but not leaving them behind, stopping every few steps, turning back, checking, making sure they were still moving, still following. Still together. The light from above grew stronger with each step, bleeding down into the stairwell, mixing with the cold artificial glow below, creating a strange contrast between what had been hidden and what was about to be exposed. The sound of the helicopters was loud now. Close. Cutting through the air with a steady, powerful rhythm that felt almost unreal after the silence underground. Daniel reached the top first. He pushed the hatch open wider, stepping out into the rain. The storm had begun to break. Not fully. But enough. The sky was lighter. The wind less violent. The forest, waking back up. But it didn't feel the same. Because now, Daniel could see it. The disturbance. The unnatural patterns. The places where the ground had been shifted, altered, used. Once you knew what to look for, you couldn't unsee it. The dog stepped out beside him. Her posture relaxed just slightly. Not fully. But enough to show that something had changed. Behind them, the man reached the top, collapsing to one knee as he pulled himself out of the stairwell, his body shaking, his strength nearly gone. Daniel moved quickly, catching him before he could fall completely. "Stay with me," Daniel said firmly. The man nodded weakly. His eyes unfocused but still fighting. still holding on. Above them, the first helicopter broke through the clearing. Low. Fast. Wind from the rotors tearing through the trees, sending branches and leaves into violent motion, rain scattering in all directions. Searchlights cut across the forest. Sharp. White. Sweeping. And then, voices. Over loudspeakers. Commanding. Clear. Stay where you are. Identify yourself. Daniel didn't move. Didn't raise his hands immediately. He stood still for a second. Taking it in. Because this was the moment everything changed. Not the fight. Not the discovery. The exposure. The truth coming into the light. The end of silence. He slowly raised one hand. Then the other. Not out of surrender. Out of control. The dog stayed at his side. Still. Calm. Watching everything. The helicopter lowered slightly. More voices. More movement. Figures descending. Fast. Organized. Armed. But different. Not like the ones before. These were official. Authority. Response. Too late to stop what had happened. But just in time to see it. Daniel glanced down at the open hatch behind him. Then back toward the approaching team. His expression didn't change. But inside, something shifted. Because now, this wasn't his fight anymore. It belonged to something bigger. Minutes later, the clearing was filled. Voices. Movement. Questions. Lights. The controlled chaos of people trying to understand something they weren't prepared to see. Teams moved quickly toward the hatch. Others secured the area. Medical personnel reached the man, lifting him carefully, stabilizing him, preparing to move him out. He grabbed Daniel's arm weakly as they worked. "Don't let them bury it again," he whispered. Daniel met his eyes. "Held them." "They won't," he said quietly. The man nodded slightly. Then let go. The dog stayed close. Not leaving. Not wandering. Watching everything. As if making sure it was real. As if making sure it was over. An officer approached Daniel. Mid-40s. Serious. Focused. His eyes scanned Daniel quickly, then the scene behind him. "You found this?" he asked. Daniel nodded once. "Not just me," he replied. The officer followed his gaze. To the dog. She stood still. Unmoving. Her eyes steady. The officer exhaled slowly. Then nodded. "All right," he said. "Then we're going to need everything you know." Daniel looked past him. Toward the forest. Toward the place where it had all started. The mud. The digging. The hatch. The truth buried beneath it. His voice was quiet when he spoke. But steady. "Yeah," he said. "I think you will." And as the teams moved in, as the truth began to surface piece by piece, as the system that had stayed hidden for so long started to crack open, Daniel stood there. Not as a soldier. Not as a man running from his past. But as someone who had been brought back into it. Not by choice. But by something else. Something that had refused to let him walk away. He looked down at the dog. She looked back. And for the first time, there was no urgency. No tension. Just something quieter. Something deeper. It wasn't over. Not completely. But it had begun. And that was enough. For now, the mountains looked different in daylight. Cleaner. Quieter. Like the storm had never been there. Like the ground hadn't been torn open. Like nothing had ever been buried beneath it. But Daniel Hale knew better. Because once you saw what was underneath, you didn't see the surface the same way again. The clearing had been transformed overnight. Where there had been mud and silence, there were now marked perimeters, temporary floodlights, vehicles, personnel moving with purpose, documenting, collecting, securing everything that had been hidden for so long. The hatch was no longer just a piece of metal in the ground. It was evidence. The beginning of something much larger. The end of something that should never have existed. Daniel stood at the edge of it all. Not inside the operation. Not fully outside it either. Just there. Watching. Processing. The air was still cold, but the rain was gone, replaced by a thin layer of mist that hung low between the trees, slowly lifting as the morning moved forward. Somewhere in the distance, helicopters still moved in and out, carrying people, equipment, pieces of truth that were finally being brought into the open. The man they had pulled from the underground facility had been taken hours ago. Stabilized. Alive. Barely. But alive. And that mattered. More than anything else. The dog sat beside Daniel. Quiet. Still. Her fur had dried slightly, though traces of mud still clung to her legs, her chest, her face. She didn't move much now. Didn't pace. Didn't search. Her purpose had changed. Or maybe it had been completed. Daniel glanced down at her. His hand rested gently against her neck. For a moment, neither of them moved. No urgency. No danger. Just stillness. The kind that didn't feel empty. The kind that felt earned. You knew, Daniel said quietly. Not as a question. The dog didn't react. Didn't need to. Her presence alone was answer enough. Daniel exhaled slowly. Because now he understood something that had taken him years to accept. Some things don't let you walk away. Not because you can't. But because you're not supposed to. He had spent years trying to leave it behind. The missions. The choices. The weight of decisions that didn't come with clean endings. He told himself he was done. That whatever part of him had been built for that life, was gone. But standing here now, he knew it hadn't disappeared. It had just been waiting. Waiting for a reason. The officer from earlier approached again. Slower this time. Less urgency. More weight. It's bigger than we thought, he said. Daniel didn't look at him. I know. They found connections, the officer continued. Other sites. Other locations. This wasn't the only one. Daniel nodded slightly. His eyes still on the forest. They never are. The officer hesitated for a moment. Then asked, You planning to stick around? Daniel didn't answer immediately. Because the question wasn't simple. Not anymore. He looked down at the dog. Then back toward the trees. Toward the place where it had started. The mud. The digging. The moment everything changed. He could walk away. He had done it before. But this time, it felt different. Because this time, he hadn't been pulled into it by orders. Or duty. Or obligation. He had been led. Chosen. By something that didn't follow rules. Something that saw what needed to be done. And refused to leave it buried. Daniel finally spoke. Yeah, he said quietly. I think I will. The officer nodded once. Not surprised. Then turned and walked away. Leaving Daniel alone again. Alone, but not really. The dog stood up slowly. Stretched slightly. Then stepped forward. Not toward the operation. Not toward the people. Toward the forest. Daniel watched her for a second. Then followed. Not rushing. Not questioning. Just moving. Because now, he understood. It wasn't about where he had been. Or what he had tried to leave behind. It was about what he chose next. The forest was quiet again. Sunlight filtering through the trees, breaking through the last of the mist, touching the ground in soft, uneven patterns. The same place, but not the same. Daniel walked beside the dog. Not ahead. Not behind. Together. And for the first time in a long time, the weight didn't feel as heavy. Not gone, but shared. And somewhere ahead, there were still answers. Still people who needed to be found. Still truths that hadn't surfaced yet. The story wasn't over. But it had changed. And as the two of them disappeared deeper into the trees, one thing became clear. Some bonds aren't built in comfort. They are built in moments where everything is on the line. Moments where trust isn't given. It's proven. And sometimes, the thing that finds you in the dark is the very thing that brings you back to the light.